Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're out on the water. We're going to show you how to fish one of the greatest bass lures ever made. Whether you love it, whether you hate it, there is no arguing that the Ned Rig is one of the best smallmouth catching machines ever made. And we're going to show you all the little tricks that you need to do to your Ned Rig to catch more fish while you're out there on the water. We're going to go through the gear that you need, how to rig it up, and how to fish it, and hopefully we'll catch some big smallmouth along the way. So stay tuned to the end of the video and you'll be a better Ned Rig fisherman by the end of today's episode. Let's get into it. Let's get up on the trolling motor and let's start casting. So we just rolled up to the spot here where we're going to fish this Ned Rig. We'll talk about location in a minute, but before we take a cast, let's talk about gear. This Ned Rig is a very, very simple technique and does not require a lot of fancy gear, which I love about it. Pretty much anybody already has the equipment to throw this bait. So pretty much any rod in that 6'6" to 7 foot category that's rated for medium or medium light powers will do you just fine. The key to a good Ned Rig rod is in the tip right there. You can see I have a lot of tip on this rod, but it has a lot of backbone. It shuts off fast. The tip is what's going to make you be able to feel that bait bounce along the bottom. If you have a good rod with a strong backbone and a sensitive tip, you'll be able to feel all the bites down there and set the hook really good on these fish, and you won't lose many of them. With it being a single hook, typically exposed, you land a lot of fish with this bait. As for the reel, I'm keeping it fairly simple there. It doesn't really matter what reel you use. This is just a 2500 size Shimano Sedona. The only thing that matters on your reel, considering all it does is hold your line and reel the fish in, is your drag. You want a really smooth drag on your reel. That's what's going to allow you to actually land these fish, because a lot of times you're fishing this on very, very light line. If you don't have very good drag, you'll break fish off, especially smallmouth. They like to make boat side runs and they're known for breaking you off on very light line. And then to complete this setup to be able to fish the Ned Rig, I then use one type of line. This is very important. You want to use lime green braid. I use 15-pound test. I have it on all my spinning reels. I will do a video later on why I specifically use the lime green braid and why I use braid in general on all my spinning reels. But essentially what this is going to do is give you the most sensitivity to be able to feel everything that's down there, which is key when fishing a Ned Rig. And if you're worried about the fish seeing your line, at the very end there, I tie on a fluorocarbon leader. I have 8-pound test. I can use 6, 10, it doesn't really matter. I'll use anywhere from about 4 to 10 foot of fluorocarbon leader. I'll tie it on the end there with an Alberto knot, and then I'll tie my jig head on and I'll be all good, ready to fish. The fish won't be able to see my line, but I'll be able to feel everything because I have that braid there. Now, if the rod and reel wasn't simple enough, I'm gonna go even simpler on the rest of the equipment for this rig. All you need is a jig head and your Ned Rig bait. That's all that makes up the rest of this rig. The most important part being the jig head itself. This is the key to a Ned Rig right here. You need to carry every size jig head that they make. As many different sizes as you can find. I carry everything from a 1/16 all the way to a 1/4 ounce and everything in between. I have 6 different sizes of Ned Rig heads in my boat right now. The reason I do that is so that I can choose my Ned Rig head based on the water depth or current. The lighter weight you can throw and still feel your bait, the more bites you will get at the end of the day. So you want to throw the lightest weight possible. As long as you can feel your bait, make good casts, everything you need to do, use the lightest weight you can. And when it comes to bait selection, we're going to keep it even simpler than everything else. As you can see in that bag right there, there's only one bait. I use the Z-Man TRD pretty much 99% of the time. Not saying there aren't other good baits out there that you could use to put on the Ned Rig, but I just like the way the Z-Man TRD fishes. You don't lose a lot of them, so it maintains relatively low cost. And on top of not losing any, they float perfectly straight up, which is going to get you the most amount of bites. That is why the Ned Rig is so good, that when that bait stands straight up on the bottom like that. And for colors, even simpler, I throw green pumpkin 99% of the time. So if you wanted one color, you could just get green pumpkin, you'd be just fine. I mix in black sometimes. You really don't need to get fancy with colors. If you want to, feel free and try and match the hatch to the best of your abilities in your water. If you can only afford a couple packs, just get green pumpkin and black. You'll do just fine. You won't miss any bites, I promise you. So now that we've talked about some gear, let's show you how to rig up this Ned Rig before we go to fishing it. All you have to do is take this smooth side of the Ned Rig here. You can see I have a 2-tone one, so I'll put the lighter color on the bottom. But if you were just fishing a green pumpkin, the side doesn't matter. Just go in as center as you can with your hook. Typically what I'll do before I actually put the hook in is line it up. So that hook's gonna come out right about there. So I'll go ahead and punch it in the top here. I'll feed it around the hook shank, and then I'll punch it back out right where it was gonna be straight on the hook. I'll feed it up, and as you can see, there's this wire keeper here. What I'll do is I'll feed it all the way up over the wire keeper as close to the head as I can, making sure your bait is straight, and then I'll take my finger and force the plastic back on that hook keeper. And by doing that, your bait will stay on there forever. So I know I mentioned we talk about location later. Now that we have our bait rigged up, where do we actually want to fish our bait? What I'm doing here is I'm fishing a river for smallmouth. So what I'm actually going to do is find current breaks where the water is a little bit more slack. Those are going to be the less active fish that are going to want to eat the Ned rig anyway. If you can find a pocket of slack water, all you have to do to find that is a rock could stick out a little bit further. Right here we have this tree. We also have a point off to our left that is blocking the current down this entire bank right here. Stuff like that is what's going to make it a better place to fish your Ned rig, especially if there's a rock bottom. The Ned rig excels around rocks. It goes in and out pretty well. You'll lose a couple, and that's okay. If you're not losing Ned rigs, then you're not fishing it in the right spot. You should be getting hung up every once in a while. That's what's going to get you in the zone where the fish are at. You don't want to search for fish with this bait. You want to throw it somewhere where you know they live. I actually caught a couple fish on a crankbait at this spot earlier today, and they stopped biting it, so I'm hoping I can get a couple to bite the Ned rig, and that's a perfect example of where you'd want to use it. There's a fish right there, actually. He's little. And there we go. Like I said, I was catching them on a crankbait here earlier today, and now they stopped biting it, and I ended up catching a fish on the Ned rig. I was actually fishing it a little bit differently than I usually do. We're gonna go ahead and throw her back, which we'll talk about here in a little bit once I talk about how to fish this bait. That is a perfect example of where you would want to fish a Ned rig. Now, when you're fishing a Ned rig, there's two ways that I like to fish it. In a river, the first method is not what I would do, which is going to be like a hop and pause. The only reason I don't do that in a river, especially when the current is strong, is because when you hop your bait like this, the current, it'll pick up and the current will carry it downstream and then drop it again. And then you'll pick it back up and it'll go downstream and it'll drop it again. And you're fishing your bait over top of so many fish, you're gonna miss them all because they could be behind any rock that's down there on the bottom. By hopping it like that and going over the fish, you're not gonna get as many bites. You'll still get bites, but you won't get as many as you could by fishing it the method number 2 that I like to do. That being, I'll cast it up there just like this. I'll let it sink all the way to the bottom on completely slack line, and then when I'm on the bottom, all I'll do is reel up my slack so I can feel my Ned rig, and I will slowly just drag it towards me. I won't lift it up off the bottom, but I'll feel it kind of dribble over every rock down there, and it'll slowly just bounce its way down the stream. You're almost like using it like a bottom bouncer, and I'll just let it bounce with the current, and all of a sudden while it's bouncing, you'll just feel it thump, or it'll get tight or something like that. When setting the hook, it's really easy. You can either give it just a short little snap of the wrist, or I will actually kind of just lean into them. I'll reel up my slack so I'm tight and just lean back on the fish. These hooks are so sharp and they're fine wire that they will pretty much go right into these fish's mouth without any problem. There's one, and it feels like a good one. Get cranked down on him here. So all I was doing was fishing. Let's see, he's pretty decent. I was fishing this little current break right here that you can see. It's deep up in front there, and then it gets shallow up on top. It's just like a little underwater hump or a high spot. That's all I've been targeting today, is just little rock piles like that. And you can see she wanted that Ned rig. All right, so there's another one on the old Ned there. All we were doing was just dragging it on that high spot. We're gonna go do the same thing and see if we can get another one off that little spot right there. Maybe there'll be a little school of them. Nice 2-pounder there, nothing giant, but hopefully there'll be a couple big ones down there with her. There she goes. There is fish all over the graph here. So where that rock pile comes up, it creates a hump. They can get up on top of it and feed if they want to, but then they can come on this back side here where the current breaks, because it's rolling really strong today, and they can just rest. And if you drag that Ned rig ever so slowly through there and it lands in front of one, it's hard for them to resist to bite it. The one thing with a Ned rig is that you usually have to weed through a bunch of smaller fish to actually get to some of the bigger ones. It's just the nature of the bait. So I think we found a little pod of them here. Now I just got to force myself to drag this thing as slow as they want it, because they really do not want this thing moving that fast. The only problem is you get snagged a bunch of times if you do that. But like I said, if you're not losing Ned rigs, then you're not putting it in the right place. Because obviously the fish are laying right here. They're holding behind these rocks. It's just a matter of getting the right drift and not getting hung up. Jeez. There we go. There's a fish. As soon as you pop it off a snag, they eat it. That's another tip with the Ned rig. Anytime you get hung up on something and you try and pop your bait free like that, immediately let it sink right back down to the bottom. Most of the times you will get one to come right back and bite it, and I think this is a good one too. Haven't seen her yet. Yeah, she's giant. Let's grab the net for this one. Like I said, pop it off a snag, let it sink right back down to the bottom. You'll grab it just like that. Bam. That's a tub. There's a good one right there, hooked right in the roof of the mouth on the Ned rig. Biggest fish of the day so far. We're gonna trade her in the live well for one of the other ones we got here for a picture later today. There's one. He's a little guy. And this is the problem with throwing a Ned rig sometimes. You'll catch a whole lot of little guys just like this, but that's okay. I just like catching fish. We'll go ahead and throw him back. We'll keep trying to catch some more. There's one. Came off a snag and he grabbed it, just like I was talking about. You just got to make them react to it. It's literally a reaction bite, but with a Ned rig. It's crazy. But if you pop it off a snag, usually they'll come and grab it, and that's a good one. This guy, I hope I land this fish. He's got something cool I want to show you guys. Let me just net him. Perfect. All right, check this out. This is how you know all they're trying to do is eat crawfish. If you ever catch smallmouth and they have this on their head, that is literally from them jamming their faces into the rocks to try and catch crawfish. They wear a hole on the top of their head like that, and that's why they get that. If you ever catch smallmouth and they look like that, you need to be throwing crawfish baits on the bottom, bouncing stuff like that, because that's what they're feeding on. We're gonna throw this big girl back, try and catch some more. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video talking about how to fish a Ned rig, and I hope it'll help you catch more smallmouth while you're out there fishing with the Ned rig. It's an absolutely deadly bait that catches so many smallmouth. It is hard to beat, and it just always produces fish any time of the year. So if you're having trouble catching some smallmouth in your places that you're usually going and you haven't tried the Ned rig, give it a shot, and hopefully you'll catch some more fish. If you enjoyed today's video, leave a like down below. Make sure you comment what video you'd like to see me make next, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of my fishing videos coming up. Thanks for watching.